Normandy battle breakout. What does it take to trap 200,000 enemy soldiers? How do you break through defenses that seem impossible to crack? And what happens when an entire army tries to escape through a gap the size of a neighborhood? The story of the Normandy breakout is about to answer all these questions. The stage is set. Okay, close your eyes and imagine it's late July 1944, and the Allies have been stuck in Normandy for weeks after D-Day. The situation was like a pressure cooker ready to explode. The Americans, British, and Canadian forces had made it onto French soil, sure, but they were kind of trapped in a small area. It's like being in a crowded elevator. You're in, but you can't move much. But everything was about to change, and change big time. The Allies had a plan, and they called it Operation Cobra. Pretty cool name, right? Think of it as the military equivalent of a football team's game-winning play. Everything they'd been working for came down to this moment. Operation Cobra. The big push. Now here's where things get really interesting. On July 25th, the Americans saw their chance. The Germans had moved most of their tanks to fight the British in another area, leaving their defense line pretty thin, kind of like when a soccer team pulls too many players to one side of the field, leaving the other side wide open. The Americans started with something absolutely massive. Imagine the biggest fireworks show you've ever seen, then multiply it by 1,000. That's what their air bombardment looked like. Sure, there were some scary moments when some bombs accidentally fell on their own troops. Yeah, that could happen in the chaos of war. But what came next was like unleashing a flood through a broken dam. American tanks and soldiers poured through the gap they'd created. Leading this charge was none other than General George Patton with his brand new Third Army. If you're not familiar with Patton, think of him as the military equivalent of a race car driver. He loved to go fast and wasn't afraid to push the limits. But just when the Allies thought they had the upper hand, Hitler had other plans. Hitler's last gamble. Here's where the story takes another wild turn. Hitler, being Hitler, saw this massive American advance and thought, hey, this is actually perfect. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. He rushed in 4 of his best tank divisions for something called Operation Littich. His idea? Slice through the American forces like a hot knife through butter and reach the sea. But here's the thing about the 1940s. Even then, people could crack secret codes. The Americans knew Hitler's plans thanks to something called ultra-intelligence. It's like they had read the other team's playbook before the game. When the German tanks came charging in on August 7th, they ran straight into a wall of American anti-tank defenses. It was like watching someone run full speed into a brick wall. It didn't end well for the Germans. And now we're about to see one of the most dramatic moments of the entire war. The Falaise Pocket, the Great Escape. Now by mid-August, the Allied forces were like a giant pair of scissors, about to close on the German army. The Americans were coming from one direction, the British and Canadians from another, and caught in the middle were around 240,000 German troops. The only way out for the Germans was through a tiny gap near a town called Falaise. Imagine trying to squeeze a whole football stadium's worth of people through a single doorway. That's kind of what this was like. The Polish 1st Armored Division was trying to close this gap, but between August 16th and 19th, many Germans managed to slip through. Still, the cost for the Germans was staggering. They left behind 50,000 dead and 200,000 captured. All their tanks, trucks, and heavy weapons? Gone. Those who did escape basically had to run for their lives with whatever they could carry. The race to Paris. This is where our story reaches its most exciting chapter. As the Germans retreated across the Seine River, and they were pretty good at retreating by this point, they'd had lots of practice in Russia, something amazing was happening in Paris. The people of Paris, who'd lived under German control for 4 years, decided it was time to take their city back. On August 19th, the people of Paris rose up against the Germans. When news of this reached the Allied commanders, they made a quick change of plans. The Free French 2nd Armored Division was sent racing toward Paris. Imagine the most dramatic homecoming you can think of, and multiply it by 1,000,000. On August 26th, General Charles de Gaulle, the leader of the Free French forces, walked down the Champs-Élysées in Paris. Picture the most triumphant victory parade you've ever seen. The crowds were wild with joy, and who could blame them? After 4 long years, Paris was free. The cost and legacy. Let's wrap this up with some perspective. The victory was huge, but it came at a terrible cost. Over 200,000 Allied soldiers were killed, wounded, or went missing. The Germans lost even more, over 300,000. And we can't forget the 12,000 French civilians who lost their lives during these battles. But by early September 1944, almost all of France was free. The Allies had pushed into Belgium and the Netherlands, and were knocking on Germany's door. Sure, there would be more battles ahead, including a scary moment in the winter when the Germans tried one last big attack, the famous Battle of the Bulge. But the Normandy breakout had broken the back of German power in the West. Think about it this way. If D-Day was like breaking down the front door of Nazi-controlled Europe, the Normandy breakout was like clearing the whole house. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a moment that changed the course of history forever. And there you have it. History fans, the incredible story of the Normandy breakout. If you enjoyed learning about this game-changing moment in World War II, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow.